Dear colleagues and students, if there are any students, hello again. My name is Natalia Veselova. I teach at the University of Ottawa, and one of the courses I teach at the University of Ottawa is History of Theatre. One of my favorite things to discuss when I teach this course, one of my favorite things to tell my students about is the mechanics of theater, so to say, and a history of theater as a material thing, because plays, playwrights, including Shakespeare, are read and discussed in various courses, but in this specific course, I pay attention to something different. What theater was like at the time, how it was organized, and how it was different from theater as we know it now. Elizabethan theater, Renaissance theater. Well, I guess I must apologize to my colleagues here if I will be saying some very obvious things, because as far as I understand, there are students present, and this is intended for the students, and they might not know what you obviously do. Starting with my cover slide, you can see this Latin phrase here, totus mundus agit histrionem. In translation into Ukrainian or even English, you are definitely familiar with this phrase, all worlds a playhouse. This Latin phrase was the motto on the door, placed on the door of the Globe Theatre in London, the Globe Theatre that was built in 1599. And these days, if you go to London, or hopefully when you go to London, you can still see the Globe Theatre. And you can still read this motto, all worlds a playhouse, on its door. But it's not the same original theater, unfortunately, because the original Globe was destroyed along with all other theaters in England in 1642, if I'm not mistaken, when, well, as an outcome of the Civil War in England. And well, that's a whole different story. Anyway, the Globe that we can see now in London was built in 1997, modeled after the original Globe, based on all the information historians of theater had about the original Globe and theater in England during the Renaissance. And a funny fact, this new Globe, the reproduction of the Globe, was built only 200 meters away from the place where the Globe's rival used to be, another theater of the same time, the Rose, which was actually built before the original Globe. Anyway, this motto, all worlds a playhouse, this phrase is an allusion to the Satyricon by a Latin writer, Petronius. As you probably know, well, again, that's one of the moments when I apologize to the professors, because you definitely do know. As you know, during the Renaissance, there was this renewed interest for all things ancient Greek and especially Roman literature, which was translated into the vernacular languages, English, Italian, French for the first time, and became accessible to a wider readership. And all ancient literature, ancient wisdom or lack thereof, ancient genres, ancient plays, ancient tracts became extremely popular. So this allusion to Petronius would be understood by most people who at least went to school compared to today's high school. And this phrase is not only or has been had been and has been on the door of the globe. It actually was used by Shakespeare himself in his comedy As You Like It. I quote, all world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. In a way, during the Renaissance, all men and women were players because a theater was omnipresent. In mid 1500s, and I should switch to the next slide. In the mid 1500s, there was no organized theater in England yet. A little bit of context. During the medieval period, there was just religious theater in England. It was connected to the church. And please don't let me speak about that because it's one of my favorite topics. And then we will have no time for Shakespeare if I continue speaking about medieval theater. But it was done by amateurs. So all men and women were players. Anyone who wanted to could participate in those folk, in those amateur productions. Again, as you know, the Reformation happened in Europe, and also King Henry VIII broke up with the Pope, broke up with Catholicism, and established his own church, the Church of England. As a result, everything that was connected to Catholic traditions, including religious theater, was banned. So that medieval religious theater stopped existing by mid-1500s in England. But people need and have always needed entertainment. Entertainment in England, when the theater was banned, existed in the form of different, again, amateur folk plays. For example, Christmas plays or Easter plays or Morris dancing, which was actually here on the picture. You can see Morris dancing, if you don't know what it is. It's rhythmical step dancing, traditional in England, not in the United Kingdom, in England specifically. It always involves little bells on the dancer's legs and feet. So Morris dancing was a form of entertainment, and since there was no proper religious theater as it used to be during the Middle Ages, during the medieval period, there were some leftovers of that. For example, the celebration of Saint George. Saint George Saint George is the patron saint of England. By the way, there have just been celebrations of Saint George's Day. And on that day, some of the new rules, including the king's ban on performances, religious performances, were ignored. like it happens during carnivals, you know, when rules can be ignored. So the story of St. George would be reenacted with slaying of the dragon, which allowed people to wear costumes and make the whole thing quite spectacular. So that was basically it. There was no organized theater whatsoever. On my slide, you can also see a mention of farcical folk comedies, crude comedies about a little bit like commedia dell'arte comedies with a lot of slapstick jokes, physical comedy, and plots, if I may even use this word, about a cheating wife, for example. So something very, very basic and quite bawdy that would make people laugh. Okay, what happened to those people who wanted to do more? Or was there any professional entertainment? Yes, there was. The professional entertainment existed in traveling groups, in strolling groups of dancers, musicians, clowns, jesters, who would be invited to rich people's homes to entertain the guests during a banquet, for example. That was a special bird interlude, interludes in plural, happening during fancy banquets offered by dukes and counts, other very rich people. Also, those traveling actors, strolling players, would sometimes reenact, if they wanted to be more, if they wanted to be fancier, or if the person who invited them was of a higher taste. So they would reenact some mythological stories, again, catering to the taste for ancient mythology that had just developed in the society. In the view of the state, in the view of the king, and later his, well, we skip all the complicated history of succession at the time, so we'll jump from Henry VIII right to his most famous daughter, Elizabeth I. During the time of Henry VIII, and especially during the time of Elizabeth I, there was a lot of fear of plots, treason, that kind of thing. So traveling groups, strolling players were seen as a potential danger, spreading information, connecting people from different regions of England, maybe facilitating some anti-queen's plots. So the queen eventually in, I wouldn't remember this date, but I have my notes, so you can see it on the slide. In 1572, Queen Elizabeth issued an order against strolling players, against vagabonds, for the sake of order. But she was an enlightened person. The queen loved culture, loved theater. So she wouldn't ban players, quite the opposite. She offered them an opportunity to be more organized, And that's how the professionalization of theater started in England. So that's a very important moment, a watershed moment in English theater's history. When players, actors stopped being vagabonds, they became professionalized, organized, and licensed. So licensed troops appeared. Those licensed troops were normally under the patronage of some important and rich person. Here on the slide, I have examples of the most important licensed troops, such as the Earl of Essex men, the Queen's men. There were others, but these worthy of mentioning. And the first famous individual actor in English theater became the first, became the first star. Those vagabond players were, of course, they were persons, of course, they had their own names, but no one knew them. They were not known to the public. And this first known player, this first known actor was William Kemp. We have him here on this illustration, a very famous representation of him, which in a way is one of the symbols of English theater to this day. William Kemp was a comic actor, as you can see, a Morris dancer. And later on, he participated in early Shakespeare's plays. So he's one of the first known actors known by name, who played in Shakespeare's plays. Institutionalization of theater was the next stage. So professionalization and then institutionalization, which involved licensing, of course, and also creating special performing spaces, special performative buildings. Interestingly, these days when we say theater in English, we mean both a building and the art form. In Shakespeare's time, during the Renaissance, during the 16th century, the word theater did not mean that. The word theater actually meant it was new to the English language. It came from Greek, right? And it actually meant the ancient Greek performing space. And that's it. It meant ancient Greek, it was referring to the ancient Greek performing space and not to the art form itself. The art form was called play, and as a result, the actual building or an actual building was called a playhouse. In the Renaissance England, no one would understand the word theater applied to a building. It was a playhouse, not a theater. So the first playhouses were built in the mid 1500s. Originally, those licensed troops had no buildings, no performing space of their own. They performed in taverns, in inns. So the audience would eat, drink, and watch those players performing something. The first place, or the first performing space in England that had a stage built specifically for performances was the Red Lion in London, in Whitechapel. This building was not an actual playhouse. It was an inn, as I said. So it was a multi-purpose building. People would stay there, visitors to London would stay there, people would come there to eat, people would come there to watch a play, and also they would come there to watch dog fights, because archaeological excavations revealed some sort of an arena, a small arena there, with dogs' bones and dogs' skulls that were clearly, I mean, the dogs had been clearly involved in fighting. So dog fighting and performing plays were occurring at the same time in the same spot, this Red Lion Inn. But as I said, there was a stage, a wooden platform for performances that was built in that inn specifically for the purpose of producing performances. We don't know much about the Red Lion, and it's not quite, well, on the one hand we do, because there's a lot of archaeological information, but on the other hand, we do not know what plays were performed there. The only piece of information that survived is once there was a play staged there that was called Samson. From the title, we can understand that it's based on a biblical story, but we don't know who wrote it, we don't know who performed it, we don't know anything about this Samson play. But the first official theater, the first building erected specifically for the purpose of performing, was built in 1576. It was called the theater. Again, it is a reference to the ancient Greek performing space. The name made a connection between this new thing and the classical ancient thing, the classical ancient theater. So we can say it's quite an ambitious name for the first playhouse ever in England. It was organized by businessmen. Well, there were a couple of people involved who were interested in theater as such, but mainly the idea was to make money, to profit on inviting a troupe, selling tickets, and having this business of theater. The person who received the license was James Burbage. If you are, well, there was also his partner, but his name is not that important for us right now. James Burbage, there was also his brother, but James Burbage was a more important figure, was the father of the most famous Shakespearean actor, Burbage the Younger. And I will talk about him a little bit later. So James Burbage formed the troupe. He had this building built and established the first truly professionalized and institutionalized theater in England. Interestingly, this theater, well, we are used to the idea that theaters are situated in the city center, in the city core. You want to go to the theater, you go downtown. It's not somewhere in the outskirts. Well, sometimes there are theaters in different parts of a city these days, but mainly it's in the city core. That was not the case during the period I'm talking about. Theaters were considered, well, sinful, and also the source of potential civil unrest and disorder, the source of disorder anyway. So those first buildings, not the Red Lion, because it was originally in an inn, right? But the theater and subsequent playhouses, they were built on the south bank of the Thames, on the south bank of the river in Shoreditch, on the moors. So it was very difficult to get there. It was away from central London. It was outside the city of London. It was a place where people had to go if they really wanted this questionable entertainment. And they would have to get dirty if they didn't have a fancy carriage. They had to get their feet dirty because the theater was on the moors, right? Anyway, the next year, another theater was built in the same area, the Curtain. The irony is there were no curtains in the Renaissance theater. These days, if you go to the theater, we see a curtain, right, separating the the stage from the audience. No, there was no such thing in the Renaissance theater. So the name, the curtain, comes from something else. Then the Rose Theater appeared, and James Burbage expanded his business by building another theater, Blackfriars Theater, which was actually a converted monastery. When Henry VIII reformed the church, he dissolved monasteries. So the buildings of monasteries were empty and had to be repurposed, had to be used somehow. So James Burbage decided to use one of those as a playhouse. Let's take a look at this illustration here and explore a little bit what those playhouses looked like. They were wooden structures, wooden buildings. That's why none of them survived to this day. And they had no roof. It's better seen on this slide here, on this illustration here. You see a wooden structure, wooden walls, then thatched roof, and well, thatched roof over the gallery, not over the main space, and no roof over the main space, and this so-called thrust stage that was, well, thrust into the main area, surrounded by the audience from three sides. Okay. What else should I mention at this point? Well, we will go back to the way theatrical buildings looked and were organized inside. But it's interesting that they were either octagonal or polygonal or sometimes round. They were not square buildings as we are used to seeing these days. So the shape was very different. And that shape, that round or polygonal shape, also takes us back to the original ancient Greek theater and later Roman theater, which was round. So the audience was sitting on, well, when something is round, I don't know if I may use the word sides, but the audience was surrounding the performative space. Okay. Now, who were the actors? Who were the professionals of theater? They were hired actors. Sorry, I should have started differently. They were actors organized into companies as a permanent troupe. And they also had some hired actors to enlarge this troupe for specific performances. The core of the troupe involved just 8 to 12 players. And those 8 to 12 people, all men, were shareholders of the company. So the company belonged to itself. When James Burbage built the theater and then other buildings and then the Globe, he owned the building. He didn't own the troupe itself. The troupe belonged to itself, and they worked as not just as colleagues in theater, but also as business partners. The troupe, those 8 to 12 actors, co-owned props, costumes, the plays themselves, and they received proportional revenue from the tickets sold, and then they would split this revenue. One half of it would be distributed evenly, or more or less evenly, between the members of the troupe, and one half would be used for the upkeeping, for buying more props, for buying more costumes, for buying plays, for buying new plays. New plays were something that was not so easy to get, and there would be kind of wars between different troops over new plays, new texts, and there was a lot of intrigue and espionage, to the point that actors in the time of Shakespeare would not have the entire text of the play in their possession. They would only have their parts, not knowing what the other actor what their partner is going to say on stage. Well, they would learn that during the rehearsals, but they would not have the text itself, only their own part. The person who had the entire text of the play was, well, the author of the play, obviously, maybe, possibly, the most important, the leading actor of the troupe. There was no director. The profession of a theatrical director only appeared in the early 18th century. So, there was no director. And also the prompter would have the entire text. So basically the author may be the leading member of the troupe, and the prompter were the three persons who would have the entire text to avoid espionage and leaking of the information, leaking of the text. So 8 to 12 main shareholders would sometimes hire more people if it was necessary for performing a specific play. For example, they would hire young men to play the roles of females. Again, I have to apologize to the professors who definitely know that, but maybe not all students are aware of the fact that in Shakespeare's theater, during the Shakespeare's time, all women on stage were played by men only. Women were allowed to be in the audience, but never ever on stage. And there were young male actors who would make their career to perform female roles. Normally, that would not last for a long time because their voice would break, and or they would become, their body would become more manly with years, and they would be forced to stop playing females. But sometimes actors made it their career almost for life to play females, maybe older females, mothers, or nurses, or nuns, something like that. While their younger colleagues would continue playing young females, like Juliet in Romeo and Juliet, for example. Who wrote plays? Who wrote those plays? Plays had to be produced in huge quantities because theater became more and more fashionable. More and more people, members of the audience, would come to see plays. So there have to be like an assembly line of productions. And some actors, some members of the company would try and write plays, not always successfully. But since it was such a popular form of entertainment, it became such a popular form of entertainment, the act of playwriting became prestigious and could be profitable. Because theaters would buy, companies would buy new plays. And that's how professional playwrights appeared. Also, there were, well, some professional playwrights were associated with certain companies, others were men of their own who would sell their plays to any company. And also some aristocrats would write plays for leisure. We know that Queen Elizabeth herself wrote plays, but definitely for her own entertainment, to exercise her sharp mind, and she wouldn't sell her plays to companies. No, of course not. But that demonstrates how popular and well, yes, how popular playwriting became as an occupation. Yeah, playhouse building, finally, playhouse building. Just going back to those mechanics and technicalities of theater. I already mentioned that a theater would be round or octagonal or polygonal, and it would have wooden walls and thatched roof, no roof over the central part, over the stage, just roof over galleries. Galleries were multi-purposed space. They obviously would hold some members of the audience, but also they served as dressing rooms, and they could be the place where the musicians would be, if there were musicians on top of a couple of musicians of stage. So yeah, this gallery above the stage was multi-purposed. And these galleries on the side mainly were for the richer members of the audience. The stage that we can see here, it was a thrust stage, right? So the audience surrounded it. Sorry that I'm repeating myself, but now we are looking at a proper picture, so maybe it's good to repeat that information. The audience would surround the stage from 3 sides. So the audience would interact with the players, not in the sense that the players would talk a lot to the audience, though sometimes they did. No, but the players, the actors, had to watch the reaction of the audience and to adjust accordingly. Otherwise, they would be in danger of the audience throwing something at them. They were too close. The audience was too close. So the actors had to always watch the mood in the audience. Above the stage, there was a roof. So no main roof, but this small roof above the stage would protect the actors from inclement weather. The shows, the performances would happen throughout the year. And it didn't really matter whether it was raining or there was scorching sun. The show must go on, right? And it was up to the audience how to protect themselves. Maybe they would wear hats. Well, they did wear hats, but I mean maybe warmer or larger hats to protect themselves from the weather. And if they were able to pay more, they would be sitting in this protected area in the gallery. By the way, if any of you ever go to the Globe Theatre in London, to this reconstruction of the original Globe Theatre, keep that in mind. It can start raining, or it can be very, very sunny. If you buy a cheaper tickets, you will be standing here next to the stage, completely unprotected from the weather. And you're not allowed to bring an umbrella. So either wear something to protect yourself, some hat, or buy a more expensive ticket for the gallery. The people who was standing, who were watching the show, who were standing next to the stage and watching the show in this unprotected area, were called groundlings. So that's a special word for the audience who paid less, and there was a lot more of that audience. By the way, this space was called the pit. So in the pit, groundlings were watching the show. The playhouses were quite spacious. They were large. They could hold up to 3,000 members of the audience, up to 3,000 people. And no one would even count how many people would be standing in the pit, as many as the pit could hold. But the total number was up to 3,000. Plays were performed every single afternoon except Sunday, because Sunday was reserved for attending church. Also, theaters would be closed for Lent twice a year, before Christmas and before Easter. And all theaters were closed during the plague. Now, that's interesting. We have been through a similar experience, right? When theaters were closed during the pandemic. But while our theaters were closed during the pandemic to prevent the infection from spreading, in Shakespeare's time, theaters were closed on moral grounds during the plague. Also, if you look at this picture, we can see a flag on top of the building. It means the play is on. When a play was on, a flag would be raised. What else should I mention? The stage was rather small, only 12 by 9 meters, approximately, 12 by 9 meters. And there wasn't a lot of machinery. There was a trap door, like here, through which a character would disappear or appear suddenly. And well, there were side doors and maybe a crane on top somewhere here to lift an actor playing, well, I don't know, maybe an ancient god or something like that. So compared to ancient Greek and Roman theater, especially Greek theater, this was quite primitive from the point of view of theatrical machinery. Okay, let's go on. Another slide representing the performing space. This is this fairly small stage. Since it was 12 by 9 meters, it could only hold around 12 actors at a time. That's why when we read Shakespeare's plays, there are never many characters on stage at the same time. I mentioned the trapdoor and lifting machinery. The props were very minimal, again, because the stage was so small. There were just the props necessary, absolutely necessary for the performance. Maybe a table, maybe some chairs, um, a larger chair representing the throne of some king. There would be swords for duels, for the duels of between the characters, and of course there were candles and sometimes painted backdrops, but not often. Here you can see, well, depending on the material wealth of the troupe, here you can see a curtain, which is not a painted backdrop, which just separates the space of the stage from the space where actors would go to change their costumes. On the subject of the costumes, these days, now, in our day and time, people sometimes complain that Shakespearean plays are performed in contemporary costumes, in jeans or I don't know, maybe military uniforms of the Second World War or something, depending on the concept of the director. But in Shakespeare's time, they also did not wear historical costumes. They wore the same costumes as their audience. They could play Antony and Cleopatra, or Julius Caesar, or well, other such historical characters from ancient times, wearing the same costumes as the people in the audience. There was no sense of historical costumes. So when now directors do the same thing, in a way, they follow the Shakespearean tradition of not separating the time of the audience from the time of the characters in the play. Well, the only difference would be that, I mean, between the costumes of the audience and the costumes of the actors on stage would be that the costumes on stage had to be more interesting. They had to be opulent. They had to be something to look at, more fashionable. But otherwise, entirely in the taste of the time, entirely contemporary. Okay, just a couple words about the companies. Those companies, licensed companies under the patronage of some important figures, would be formed and dissolved. They were not permanent. For example, Burbage dissolved one company and organized another when the patron, well, it's hard to tell what was first, changing the patron or changing the company. But yeah, these two things, changing the patron and changing the company, would go hand in hand. Also, something interesting happened to the Globe Theatre itself. James Burbage, fell out with the owner of the land where the theater was standing, I mean, where the Globe was standing. No, sorry, sorry. I know that my time is, I'm running out of time, so I'm getting a little bit nervous about that. Let me start again. James Burbage had a conflict with the owner of the land because he only owned the building, not the land itself. So he had to take the theater apart, actually, physically, literally, and built a new building, the Globe, on a different plot of land with the same timber, with the same materials, with the materials coming from the theater. Okay, I don't remember why I said that, why I started saying that. But I'd like to mention that even when companies were changing patronage, the actors could remain in the same company. For example, a certain actor, William Shakespeare, had never switched company. He had always stayed with the same company. Players, actors, I already said quite a bit about who the actors were. But now I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that after William Kemp became the first actor known by name, more other actors who the audience knew by name and who the audience would come to see appeared. In the Rose Theatre, for example, Ned Allen was drawing the attention of the audience, and in James Burbage's company, it was his son, Richard Burbage, who became the main attraction for the audience. To the point that one of the actors of the company, Bill Shakespeare, would write his plays with Richard Burbage in mind. Richard Burbage, who was supposed to play all the central parts in practically all of Shakespeare's plays. That is why, with time, Shakespeare's central characters age. They become older and older and older, from Romeo to King Lear. Why? Because Richard Burbage was aging. And if the roles of young men were written by Shakespeare for young Richard Burbage, decades later, they were written for Richard Burbage, who was in his middle age, in his older years. Well, I don't know if you're aware of the fact, again, the professors probably are, but maybe not the students. I don't know if you're aware of the fact that Hamlet, in the eponymous play, is a man in his mid-30s. We're used to seeing Hamlet on stage played by younger actors. And we have this image of Hamlet as a young man, especially given that he's a student. But no, Hamlet is a man in his 30s who is carrying some extra weight and has a breathing problem. That's because Richard Burbage was in his mid-30s, was putting on some weight and started puffing while acting. So That's how Hamlet, that's why Hamlet was, the description of Hamlet in the play was created by Shakespeare to match the physicality of Richard Burbage. Okay, well, here I have, of course, this man here on the illustration is Richard Burbage. And one piece of information on this slide that is worthy of our attention is that since there was a performance every single day except for Sundays and for Lent, for the time of Lent, the production of plays had to be very fast, and throughout the year there had to be at least 30 and up to 38 different plays put on by a company. That means for every play they only had a couple of weeks to prepare the show, to prepare production. Well, we know what the performing space looked like. We know what who the actors were. Now, the audience, who was watching those plays? The audience was all kinds of people. The audience would come from all walks of life. Well, as you already know, there were more expensive seats in the gallery that would cost sixpence, which was not, which was quite a bit of money, and there were groundlings in the pit who would pay 1 penny only to watch the show. And what did the audience do during the show? They were not simply watching what was happening on the stage. They were also eating, drinking, expressing their emotions very loudly. They wanted the plays to be more and more action-packed, entertaining. Well, just like these days, the audience in movie theaters favors blockbusters. That's why in Shakespeare's plays, there are so many duels. There are so many deaths. There's so many, there are so many horrible things happening. The audience wanted to see that. The audience wanted more excitement. Eating and drinking during the performance was the total norm, and we know that for fact because during the excavations, archaeological excavations of the spots where one of the Renaissance theaters was, a thick layer of nutshells was discovered, a really thick layer of nutshells. So the audience was buying and eating nuts in large quantities during the performance. Just like today, these days, there are concessions in theaters. During the intermissions, you can go to buy some snack or a drink, right? There were concessions in Shakespearean theater, at the time. There were vendors selling, well, nuts and drinks and other things. And of course, there were other less legitimate businesses, such as pickpockets, prostitutes, well, and other such things. Well, by things I mean not pickpockets and prostitutes, but businesses, or quote unquote businesses. Well, finally, almost finally, who wrote the plays? I mentioned that there were some professional playwrights, and there were also aristocrats writing plays. The most important people, the most important playwrights before Shakespeare were Thomas Kidd, Christopher Marlowe, and Ben Jonson. Thomas Kidd created a new genre, revenge play. And in one of his revenge plays, there's a young man who goes mad, who schemes revenge, who plots revenge, and also there's a ghost. Sounds familiar, right? So Shakespeare borrowed those plot elements from Thomas Kidd and developed them later in Hamlet. Well, Christopher Marlowe is the playwright whose portrait we have here on the illustration. Christopher Marlowe was a colorful character, extremely talented as a playwright. Also, he was a double agent, a spy, and he died very young at the age of 29, killed in a drunken brawl in a tavern with a knife put through his eye. Well, we don't know whether it was an accident or whether he was killed by someone's orders or at someone's orders. So Marlowe created complex characters in The Jew of Malta and in Dr. Faustus. Unfortunately, I have no time to talk about those, but that complexity led to further complexity of characters in Shakespeare's plays. And Ben Jonson basically invented English comedy, which also led to Shakespeare's production of comedies. And well, there was another playwright called William Shakespeare, who was an actor with the Lord Chamberlain's men, and he never ever published his plays. That's true. Shakespeare did not write his plays for publication. He wrote his poems for publication, but not the plays. He was a shareholder actor in one of the companies in the Lord Chamberlain's Men. So his plays were the material for his troupe to produce shows. And the some of the best elements in Shakespeare's works are caused by the fact that he was an actor. Well, I'm not going to talk about Shakespeare a lot, not just because I don't have much time left, but also because, well, the professors here know a lot about Shakespeare themselves, and the students will learn from their professors, not from me. I just want to draw your attention to the fact that as an actor, Shakespeare knew how to make plays appealing for the audience. He saw that audience 300 days a year. He knew the taste of the audience very well, much better than playwrights who were not actors. Also, he understood very well certain technicalities of theater. He knew what had to be in a play so that it would be comfortable for the actors to perform. Just one example. You've seen on the illustrations, you've seen the pictures of that theater. There was little space for special effects. And also, what do you do with dead bodies of characters? The audience wanted duels, wanted deaths, but what do you do with the dead bodies? If an actor whose character has just been killed stands up and walks away, it's ridiculous. That's why there is always a trick in Shakespeare's plays to do that graciously. When Hamlet kills Polonius, in Hamlet, obviously, Hamlet drags the body of Polonius away in the text of the play. So the actors didn't have that problem, that technical problem. Also, why are there so many soliloquies in Shakespeare's plays? Is it just because he wanted to be philosophical? Is it just because he wanted to exercise his wit? No, it's because the actors, there was a limited number of actors, right? And actors often played different roles throughout the show. They had to go backstage and change their costumes. So while Hamlet or some other character is talking to the audience, while we are listening to his soliloquy, other actors are changing backstage. Also, why are there so many descriptions of ambience in Shakespeare's plays? When in the opening scene of Hamlet, the appearance of the ghost is described is because there were very few props, right? And there was no way of creating this atmosphere of darkness, of some sort of tempest on stage. No, it was practically a bare stage. So everything was described with words, and the audience had to imagine the night, the wind, the sounds, and everything, the rain. The location was explained in the play, was explained with words because it could not be shown. By the way, I didn't mention that all the plays were performed during the daytime with the natural light. That's why there was no roof. They needed light. These days we are used to go to the theater in the evening, but not in Shakespearean theater. It was all happening by daylight. So again, the audience could only imagine night when described by characters. While the audience wanted a frequent change of location, but those locations could not be changed because there was no, again, stage design. So that change would also be described with words. And in Shakespeare's plays, we see a very careful arrangement of mise en scène, a very careful pre-arrangement of mise en scène, detailed description of the ambience. We see advantageous roles for actors. When we think of any Shakespeare's play, we can notice that there are multiple good roles in, well, I keep talking about Hamlet because most people are familiar with Hamlet better than with other plays. There are no quote unquote bad roles in Hamlet. Every single role, even a small one, the gravediggers, give, well, all the small roles give actors an opportunity to showcase themselves, to demonstrate their craft. Whether an actor is playing Hamlet, whether the actor is playing Ophelia, whether the actor is playing a gravedigger, there is something to do with the role. Well, that's because Shakespeare's colleagues would be very angry with him if he didn't give them good material to perform. That's how Shakespeare's theater, Shakespeare's plays are all based on his experience with the material side of theater. Oh, by the way, Shakespeare himself was not a great actor. He played only secondary parts, and in his own play, Hamlet, his role was the ghost. Shakespeare, as an actor, played the ghost, and never any central role. Okay, I don't have time to talk about other things and about maybe the aesthetics of Shakespearean plays. Let me just mention that he was following not only his experience as an actor, as a shareholder of his company, but the aesthetic trends of the time based on translations of the ancients, especially Ars Poetica by Horace, which stressed the importance of poetic skills. And Shakespeare also followed the ideas of his contemporary Philip Sidney, who wrote a tract, The Defense of Poetry, introducing the idea or stressing the idea that for a successful play, there should be a combination of laughter and tears, of violence and entertainment. I mean, of violence and laughter. Philip Sidney put it as sweet violence of a tragedy, the attraction of horror. When we think of Shakespeare's plays, especially his early play Titus Andronicus, we can understand how Shakespeare applied that idea to his works, and mingling kings and clowns. In one of his plays, Shakespeare does that literally in King Lear, right? When there's the king, a tragic figure, and a clown, quote unquote, the king's jester. And they operate together, ensuring the audience's interest. Oh, okay. And I promise not to talk about Shakespeare's aesthetics, and here I am talking about it, but I promise I'm almost done. Finally, another source, key source of Shakespeare's aesthetics was an Italian philosopher, Cintio, a contemporary of Shakespeare, who suggested that tragedies should draw their plots from history, and comedies should be, comic plots should be invented by the author to be original and to surprise the audience. Actually, it was not the original idea. The Greeks had already done that, and the Romans too. Also, Cynthia suggested to use horror and compassion to give moral lessons to the audience. Again, something coming from the ancients, the idea of catharsis, right? Purgation of purging of emotions through horror and compassion. And one aspect of Cynthia's aesthetics was ending tragedies happily, which Shakespeare also employed. Sounds paradoxical, right? But a quote unquote happy ending in a tragedy is not the same thing as a happy ending in a comedy when everyone gets married. Everyone gets married and lost children are found and things like that. No, in tragedies, a happy ending, and in Shakespearean tragedies, means restoring the order of the world, the harmony of the world. And if we look at it from this point of view, it happens in every tragedy. Since I've been using the example of Hamlet, that's what happens at the end of Hamlet. Yes, Hamlet dies, but he pays with his life for the restoration of the order. Fortinbras comes and brings order to the land, which used to be ruled by the usurper, and the history of Denmark starts anew under the rule of this wise and noble man. That's a happy ending of Hamlet. And we can see a similar thing happening in practically every tragedy of Shakespeare, but unfortunately I have no time to analyze more. Well, thank you so much. I think I should stop here. Even though, okay, before I stop, you see, I'm so greedy, I can't stop. One last, really, seriously, last thing I'd like to tell you about. This portrait, you know, I'm in Canada, right? I'm Canadian and I'm teaching in a Canadian university. So this is something close to home. This portrait of Shakespeare, called the Saunders portrait, is allegedly the only true likeness of Shakespeare. It is absolutely, well, it's a fact that this portrait was painted during Shakespeare's lifetime. There are scientific proofs on every level. And also the Saunders family, this portrait comes from 400 years ago, was well acquainted with Shakespeare. I didn't explain the Canadian connection. This Saunders portrait has been kept in a family, the same family, for 400 years, and now this family lives in Canada. And this portrait was not discovered, but because they had it right in their possession, but this portrait was made public some 10 years ago. I don't remember exactly when. And since then, it was proved that this portrait is made during Shakespeare's lifetime and represents Shakespeare at the age of 39, and was made for a person who lived in the same area as Shakespeare, in the same part of London, so for a friend, for a neighbor. And even though there are some historians who try to undermine the reality of the likeness of Shakespeare on this portrait, most don't. So now we are looking at the face of Shakespeare at the age of 39, painted by someone who knew him personally, and it's not a posthumous portrait like the most portraits of Shakespeare we know. And yeah, that's one of the Lord Chamberlain's men, an actor named Will Shakespeare. Well, and I will stop here. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Please, your question. So, please.
Questions?
Questions for Natalia?
What do we have in the chat? Ah, okay, nothing. Right. No, everyone's tired, I'm sorry. But it was the length of a normal, typical university lecture. I didn't abuse.
Let me just express
Please.
my gratitude to this lecture no, let me express my gratitude to you for this lecture. For this lecture, it was very informative and very interesting, very captivating. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I guess that everyone enjoyed the lecture.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, please.
Well, as I said, I guess everyone is tired. So it's okay if there are no questions.
Any question?
Thank you so much for presenting us Shakespeare Theatre. It was so interesting and nice. As for me, happy end for tragedy is something interesting for me. As for me, it's it's a very interesting thought. I think so. Very interesting thought.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, indeed, many things that we take for granted these days were very different in Shakespeare's time. For example, Romeo and Juliet definitely has a happy ending. 100% has a happy ending.
Yes, always crying. Yes, always crying.
No.
Tears and so on, but happy end.
Yeah.
It's something brain blowing.
Right, but you see, the families are reunited. The feud is over. That's a happy ending. The harmony is
yes,
restored.
really. Now I know. Thank you.
Also, another interesting idea about, well, not an idea, fact about Romeo and Juliet, it was half a comedy. Oh, we are used to crying over the deaths of those young lovers, but no, the audience in Shakespeare's time would laugh at them because they were stupid teenagers who didn't listen to their parents and were duly punished for that. And also, the English people were in Shakespeare's time were extremely xenophobic. They just hated and despised foreigners. In the play, in Romeo and Juliet, we see Italians. So the audience would laugh at those ridiculous Italians who were not as smart and noble as Englishmen. Yeah.
Thank
Also,
you. I love it.
it's probably the first European play where a female expresses her love poetically herself. So that's also an interesting innovation of Shakespeare. Mhm. Yeah.
Thank
Just
you.
checking the chat.
And please. Ну, тоді добре. Будемо закінчувати. Дуже
We are
дякую.
looking forward for the next lecture. We are looking forward. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Е,
If I'm invited next time, maybe I should make it shorter, then you will be less tired and we'll ask some questions.
We are
Please.
not tired. We are not tired at all, I assure you. So don't worry. It was absolutely amazing. Absolutely. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
You're absolutely great.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.